Today we're here at Four Roses Distillery with Master Distiller Jim Rutledge. Jim, thank you very much for your time. This place is absolutely gorgeous, as you can see right now. And here we are, Jim Rutledge. Very nice to meet you.
Good to have you here.
Thank you, sir.
And it is a beautiful, unusual architecture, Spanish mission style architecture that this building, the original distillery on this site was across the road and burned turn of the century. Of course, the turn of the century I'm talking about is more than a century ago.
Yes.
And we built this, so this was built in 1910, went into operation.
Okay.
And
why was it built with the Spanish look too?
We wish we knew.
Oh, okay.
I'm old, but not that old. But yeah, it's someplace you expect to maybe find in Southern California, New Mexico, southwestern U.S., but not here. It's totally unique, and it is a beautiful building. So that's our original distillery building. A lot of it's changed on either side, a lot of it hasn't. And so we're going to walk in here, we'll walk up to see our mash tub. When we cook, the mash tub is a large cooker.
Okay.
When we're mashing, we're cooking.
Okay.
And then we won't go through in sequence because we back and forth all over. We'll go up to the mash tub, we'll look at some of our yeast tubs, our still, and walk over and look at the ferment.
All right, that sounds good.
That's all right in here.
Well, let's go get at it. Jim, what exactly do we have? This looks like a grain truck to me, but is that what we have here?
No, this is our distillate.
Okay.
Bourbon distillate. People call it White Dog. Some people say moonshine or whatever. It's a excellent moonshine.
Yes.
But that's what comes off the still.
Okay.
Now our warehouses are separated from the distillery by 50 miles. The warehouses across the road there actually belong to Wild Turkey.
Okay.
And
that's interesting.
Used to be with Seagram when I started in 1966. We had 5 operating distilleries. They belonged to Seagram back then, but they were sold in 1976 to Wild Turkey. And for the same reason, we started our 10 recipes of bourbon. To achieve consistency, we built single-story rack warehouses rather than multi-story, because like in the hotter summer months, there'll be a temperature differential of 35 plus degrees from the bottom floor to the top floor. And for bourbon, especially for bourbon, we wanted to achieve consistency. We already have all the variables we need in flavor profiles with our 10 recipes. So we built a facility that was like the hub of a wheel.
Okay.
Now, as we began to close these distilleries, the first one closed in 68, and then through the 70s, the last one in 83. As we began to close these, we would add a different yeast, another yeast to our distillery here, and that's how we ended up with 5 yeasts called strains, proprietary yeast strains, and 4 closed. We already have 1 here.
And then 1 here.
So to get 10 recipes, different flavors, profiles. So they're all closed. Now we have this facility 50 miles, but that's why we're separated by 50 miles.
Okay.
And this is a tank truck.
It's taken it to the other facility.
That's right.
And it'll be barreled at the other facility?
Right. We gauge it. Gauge it means we measure the gallons we put in this truck. We put it on the scale. We proof it. We know the strength, alcohol strength, when it goes down. And then anytime you move spirit from one location to another, point A to point B, even inside the distillery, we have to measure and account for any losses or gains. So when we get to the angel shares in the warehouse.
I'm asking.
No.
Yeah.
No, this is
pure loss.
Yeah. Or gain.
Or gain.
It could be a loss or gain. And if you lose at one place, you can make it up at somewhere else. But so we receive this tank truck down in our warehouse facility. 6 samples. We proof it again, and then
we got traffic.
We'll take the strength again. Then we unload it, put it in tanks, we put it on scales, we calculate the gallons based on the alcohol proof, and so we gauge it again. Then we calculate the amount of demineralized water. We have RO water, reverse osmosis water, removing the minerals from the water that we have to add to that tank to lower it to our barreling proof.
Sure.
Bourbon can only, maximum strength you can barrel bourbon is 125 proof, or 62.5% alcohol. So we come off our stills about 140 proof plus or minus just a little bit. So we have to take that down, calculate it, fill the brand new white oak barrels, chart on the inside, put them in warehouse, and again, we start from the distillery, fill the tank truck with a very high proof distillate, White Dog, take it down to a barrel facility, unload it, add water to get it to 120 proof. That's the barrel strength we use, and put it in barrels and ready to wait for 6, 8, 10 years.
There you go. Ready to wait. I like to sometimes throw it in there.
Okay. The key to smoothness and mellowness, what comes, my focus has always been on what goes into the barrel versus most people talk about, thousands of barrels they smell, taste, and my focus is always what goes into the barrel, far more so than what comes out of the barrel. Philosophy, do it right the first time.
Yes.
And you don't have to worry about so much what comes out of the barrel.
Okay.
The key to smoothness and mellowness, if you want to end up with something really good in that bottle, the key to it is starting with the best raw materials available. And we're in our 54th season of using this same small geographic area in Indiana to purchase our corns. We pay a bonus. We don't negotiate because we're buying a lot of bushels of grains. We don't negotiate something lower than the Wall Street Journal price. The corn we use is listed in the Wall Street Journal as yellow corn number 2.
Okay.
And you can find the cost per bushel on that. But we will, before we ever unload anything out of a truck, we will come over and sample the grain,
Cooking some corn here.
and if it pops, it fails.
So we might have popcorn, or we have.
We better not have.
Yeah.
But that, the heating up, and you see a little watch glass on top, just
Yes.
like we're tasting bourbon out of a barrel, or the distillate to prove it going into the barrel, same principle. Just pop this out and make sure there's nothing for them. Very nice, sweet, pleasant aromas, no foreign odors at all. And if it has anything like a hint, a trace, only barely perceptible of a must or mold or some other characters, it's an automatic reject. We don't approve it.
Okay.
But that's key to starting. That's why we're starting here on the tour.
Wow. You smell that.
It has to be right.
Mm-hmm.
Which we have some rye and malted barley.
You do the same thing?
Do the same
Put it in the
thing.
microwave and then.
Just heat it and approve
Heat
it.
it.
If there's any all characters at all, then we'll several of us get it together.
So you're more on the beginning end of the bourbon, making sure everything goes in correctly.
That's what I mean.
And if that's the case.
My focus is always in what comes off the still, which begins right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then what comes off the still is what is reduced with demineralized water. We fill the barrels and the aging process. But if you fill it with something really good going in, the chance to have something really good coming out are increased dramatically. Well, all right. Once we make it cook,
Yes.
over the other side, we're going to walk over in just a minute.
Okay.
Once we've transferred grain from the meal bin inside to the cooker, that automatically turns computers then will automatically turn the mills on, hammer mills, and drops the grain, runs through the hammer mill, and there's an air bear system then that will transfer from here to the meal bin, refill that meal bin, and it's ready then for the next cook when it rolls around. It's all automatic computer. When I started, we did everything manually, and it's a lot more efficient. We run better. I mean, the bourbon that we as an industry make today is a lot better than we did. When I started, I first started as a distillery supervisor. Started in '66, went into the distillery, and this is fall of spring of '69, I think.
Okay.
And so everything was by manual. Everything, if we wanted to change the feed rate of the finished beer, distiller's beer. When we fill a fermenter, we add the yeast. What's inside that fermenter we call distiller's beer. So that's where we make the alcohol.
Okay.
So we're now feeding a beer still. If we want to change a flow rate from, doesn't make any difference, 4,000 gallons an hour or 4,500 down to 3,800. We'd have our valves on the stills or the pump. We have pencil marks on them about where to set them. It might take us an hour or two to get everything just right. Today, in a heartbeat, we're going to go from 4,200 gallons an hour to 3,800. We set on the computer and it's done.
Wow.
And we're so much better today because of those kind of controls than anybody could ever dream to be in back 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even the 80s or early 90s.
Keeps it a lot more consistent too.
That's right.
On the level.
That's right. Mash tub with to the little over 14,000 gallon capacity, so it's a little bigger than that. We'll fill that about 11,500 gallons.
11,500?
Right.
Of the 14? Okay.
And we will maybe talk about later. But we'll fill it with water. We'll add our malted barley, just 3 bushels. We call it free malt. And the malted barley is going to break the starch molecules down to small molecules with the sugar for fermentation. That also changes the viscosity of the liquid in here. If we didn't add that malted barley, and it works in a heartbeat, millions of these starch molecules would be broken down to sugar. But in doing that, it also changes the viscosity, liquefies what's in here. If you've ever made cornbread,
Yep.
just put water in cornbread meal, stir it, mix it up. It's very thick, and there's no way you can dip it out, but you can't pump it. So when the malted barley breaks that, it's like, oftentimes I use it as an analogy of talking to groups of people. I'll take a little bite of spaghetti. This is starch, and I'm saying that little bite is that long starch, that's that little molecule that breaks it down. And so that changes, we'll heat that 3 bushels of malted barley, we'll add the cornmeal, take it up to boiling, hold it for 30 minutes, cool it down to 162 degrees, add our rye meal, hold it at 156 for 30 minutes, take it down below 150 degrees, add the balance of the malted barley. The properties, the enzyme properties will be still above 150 degrees. That's how fast that works and how fast it's 3 bushels. If we didn't get those 3 bushels in here, we'd have 12,000 gallons of cornbread meal.
Yeah.
We'd
Feed a lot of
trouble.
people.
Take a long time to dip it out, too.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever you get a chance.
Now, you're going to have a bubbling sound here.
Yeah.
You're free yeast tub.
We probably won't get on here, so you can explain the drive, but I'll do this. You hold it. Yeah.
All right, this is one of our 3 yeast tubs. We keep our 5 proprietary yeast strains in a freeze-dried state. We'll start a yeast every week, even if we're going to stay on the same yeast for 3 or 4 weeks at a time. And this is the key to the operations, controlling the most difficult part is controlling the integrity of the yeast. And a yeast will mutate in a heartbeat if it doesn't is not handled right. We start off with a small test tube. They put a little slant in a 500 milliliter flask of diamalt, very rich, high nutrients. The yeast will grow fast, and the yeast will consume that sugar. Anyway, it grows to about that 500 milliliter flask. We've that to a jug. After another 24 hours, above here is what we call a donut tub, and that's about 150 gallons. That's a third day, so we take 24 hours in a flask, 24 in a jug, 24 in a donut tub. Then we have a sufficient amount of yeast to inoculate this yeast tub. That'll take us about 12 hours to get to the point where we will then, we call it ice it. We'll get as close as we can and stabilize the yeast. So then we're going to put this in a tank truck. We'll gauge it. I calculate the volume that's in the truck, the strength, alcohol strength in the truck, and then we'll take it down there, gauge it. We unload it, gauge it again, add the water to get it down to our barrel strength and fill barrels. But right now, that's what, it's not yet a bourbon, because one of the requirements of bourbon is that it has to be aged in a brand new oak barrel charred on the inside. The bourbon distillate, now once we put this in that oak barrel, charred oak barrel, it might be aged a minute or two, but it's a bourbon because it's being aged in an oak barrel. Right now it's a bourbon distillate, or white dog.
White dog.
And this is the key to it. As I mentioned earlier, my focus has always been on what goes into the barrel, and that's this. If you want to smell and taste this, it's unbelievable. Now, that's about 140 proof, but this is absolutely key. Just smelling it, you'll see how clean, the fruitiness, the flavor that's there, and that's at 140 proof. It's 140 proof. Yeah. So that's amazing. The flavor's there. Now we will take that and we will reduce that strength from about 140 down to 40 proof to 20%.
Wow.
So I'm going to cut this out. You're not used to this. So we will actually take this in our lab to improve barreling. We will reduce it to 20% alcohol or 40 proof. Okay. Because we're looking, we have 10 distillates now. So we're looking for the little differences, the nuances, the flavor profiles that we're targeting. And this, at this strength, will overwhelm your senses. You can tell it's
You can't have too much of
clean,
that, period.
crisp, and
Oh, I love the taste of it, but you're not drinking too much of that.
to me it's amazing how good that is.
Oh, it's
That
awesome.
strength.
Jim?
Okay, these are the grains we use. We've talked about our 2 mash bills.
Okay.
And when we fill that cooker, our cooker capacity is about 14,000 gallons, as you saw. We fill about 11,500 gallons of water. We don't want what's in it sloshing out as we stir it during the cooking process.
Sure.
When we first add the water, we'll put 3 bushels we call pre-malt. That's all it takes.
Okay.
Then we put all the corn in.
Okay.
And we'll heat that up to boiling. We'll hold it there for 30 minutes. Now, we use the pre-malt if we were to, say, fill that with cornmeal, forget, or somehow the malted barley did not get into it. Mm-hmm. Malted barley breaks the starch of the grains,
Okay.
whether it be rye or corn in our situation, or other distilleries use wheat. They're all starches. To make alcohol, we need to convert that to sugar. That's what the malted barley. It's similar,
breaks it down,
an analogy, right? It
Okay.
starts molecular chain, this long molecular chain. It's just like the enzymes in your mouth. That when you take a bite of potato, bread, corn,
Yep.
the starches, the enzymes in your mouth, and a heartbeat. Break this down to small molecules, which we glucose, sugar for your bodies.
Okay.
Malted barley does the same. We can malt any grains, malted barley works better than other grains. So if we didn't get that in there, the malted barley does two things. It breaks the starch to sugar for fermentation. When the yeast consumes the sugar as byproducts, generates alcohol, congeners, the alcohol flavors, carbon dioxide, the bubbling that we saw on top of the fermenters.
Yes.
So we have to have that for the process. But if we didn't have it in the cooker, we would have the 12,000 gallons of cornbread mix or meal.
Cornbread mix.
So that's the purpose of the malted barley. And then after we've held it for 30 minutes at boiling, we will lower that temperature down to about 162 degrees. We add our rye grain and we'll put it in, hold that for another 30 minutes at 156 degrees. By the time we get the rye in, it's down to 156. And then we drop it down below 150 degrees and we add the balance of the malted barley.
Okay. On the backside of it.
Right, because the enzyme activity is killed above 150 degrees. So those 3 bushels will convert all this enough to liquefy, change the viscosity where we can handle the liquid, the mash. So that's our grains we use. Of course, these are whole grains. Down here illustrates the meal. When
Okay,
we've
yeah.
gone through our mills, converted the whole grains to meal for the cooking process.
All right.
Or mashing process. Cooking and mashing are synonymous in our process.
Yeah, in your process.
When we talk mashing, we're cooking.
Yeah, you're cooking. So the mash bill is a whole cooking bin, basically.
Right, well, the mash bill is the recipe of grains.
Yes.
It's like, you're gonna make a cake at home, you have a recipe. That's our recipe of grains that we're gonna use to make our bourbon.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, that's good. We're now here in this beautiful tasting room. Jim's going to take us through a little bit about these bourbons and what we're supposed to taste when we actually taste these bourbons. So, Jim, what are we going to start with?
Good. Pour you all 3 of our regular bourbons.
Okay.
Our yellow label, as we discussed out here, we have 10 recipes of bourbon that we distill separately, fill barrels separately, and age separately. We started that back in the late 40s with part of Seagram to achieve consistency, since there's no 2 barrels ever alike in a barrel inventory. Every barrel has its own fingerprint of flavor. If you're going to dump 1,000 barrels for a bottling run or 100 barrels or whatever, if it's 100 barrels, you have 100 variables. So how do you achieve consistency from bottling run to bottling run? Answer is you can't. They're never consistent, no matter what bourbon it is. But that was the idea behind this, is maybe the most consistent. Doesn't make, to me, any difference, because that's part of the art of the industry. But this is, Yellow Label uses all 10 recipes. We have a designed blend formula of all 10 Kentucky straight bourbon whiskeys. Then, prior to a bottling run, we will sample the barrels, tweak that formula a little more, one less of another, here or there. May not even need all 10 recipes to achieve consistency. The best can be done. It still can't be done.
Okay.
But, so that's our Yellow Label. We bottle that. We have 2 mash bills, and we have 5 proprietary yeasts. I don't know anybody else that uses more than 1 yeast.
No, and you all use 5. So
We have 5, and the combination with 5 yeasts with each mash bill at different times. That's how we generate the 10. Both mash bills are very high rye content. That is bottled at 80 proof. Of the 2 high rye content, one has 20% rye. That's our lowest rye, which is a very high rye.
Yeah.
And then our other mash bill has 35% rye. Now, Yellow Label has 2/3 of the 20% mash bill, with all 5 recipe, and 1/3 of the higher rye mash bill. So it's the lightest body of all of our bourbons, bottled at 80 proof.
Okay. What am I supposed to taste when I taste the Yellow Label? What is the taste flavor?
It's, as I said, it's light bodied, it's moderately woody, it has some light caramel, vanilla flavors, it has light fruits,
Smells
like
delicious.
pear, apple, and to me, it has an exceptionally smooth
Smell it.
finish.
Cheers. It's a little bit of roses. Nice.
Then,
Definitely can taste that.
I'm going to start off with our single barrel because when we came back to the U.S., Seagram had a blended whiskey with our name on the bottle. Instead of bourbon below the roses, it said premium. Had a yellow label on it. It was a pale yellow label, but there's a lot of confusion. Now, our bourbon was in export. A lot of people think we quit making bourbon back in the 50s.
Correct?
We were just in Europe, #1 selling bourbon in many European countries and also Japan, but we weren't in the U.S. By 1960. You couldn't find a bottle because we were pulled off the market at the end of the 50s, even though through the 30s, 40s, and 50s, Four Roses was the #1 selling bourbon. So you pulled us off the market. But back in those years, top shelf brands were all considered blended whiskeys. Bourbon as a category was much lower, just the reverse of today. So
when did they start coming? When did Four Roses actually come back into the United States? Start filtering back in?
we started, unfortunately, when Seagram went out of business. I had an ongoing debate for many years with Seagram,
Okay.
and trying to just make the blended whiskey go away. Let it be off the market a few years. Let us bring our bourbon back home. And this went on for a number of years. Unfortunately, it took Seagram going out of business. But we were one of 225 Seagram brands, the top-selling bourbon in many European countries and Japan. And they would tell me, and I couldn't argue with them on it. It says, Jim, it doesn't make any difference how passionate you are about the bourbon. It doesn't make any difference how good the bourbon may be. Seagram is not willing to spend the millions of dollars because of one person's passion. You're one of 225 brands. You're #1 in many European countries, Japan. It's just not going to happen. That didn't make the debate stop. It just kept on and on and on.
Well, thank goodness you did.
Unfortunately, Seagram went out of business at the end of 2001. And first question I had of our new owners in January. Sorry, I don't want this to go on.
Hey, it's all
In
good. It
January,
happens to everybody, see?
In January 2002, first question I had of our new owners, are you willing to just make the blended whiskey go away, explain it has nothing to do with us, except it has our name on the label, and has a bad reputation, and let us bring our bourbon back home, and they agreed. Now, we knew we couldn't focus on this because of the perception, the resemblance of the blended whiskey to our bourbon.
Sure.
People wouldn't, they'd walk in a liquor store and they see Four Roses, Red Roses, wouldn't take the time to see this is bourbon, not the blended whiskey. So we introduced our single barrel. Our first marketing efforts were just 10 years ago. We've come light years since then.
The single barrel is
September, that's when we
10 years?
started. No, I'm saying that's when we introduced it.
Okay.
In September 2004, that began, we were only in Kentucky back then, but that began our return. So that's our single barrel. That's one of our recipes, and it's it has a doesn't want to let you drink too much here.
There you go. Hey, it doesn't want you to drink at all.
Well, that's one way to cure that.
He's just gonna pour it straight. I like this.
And don't drink all that because I want you to compare that to the small batch. So that's our recipe with 60% corn, 35% rye.
Okay.
Both mash bills, as we discussed, use 5% malted barley. But smell it, taste it, that's our single barrel bourbon, bottled at 100 proof. It's a 35% rye mash bill, and to balance and complement that high rye, we use one of our yeasts that generates this very light and delicate fruitiness. And right out the bat, in March 2005, even though we're right at new back in the market, it won American Whiskey of the Year, aged 10 years or less, by Whiskey Magazine. And I was over in London for those awards. We were so new in the market, I didn't think that would happen, but I felt like it should happen.
Yeah.
But we're new back in the market, and it did. And
So that's
later that year, the first weekend,
skyrocketing.
well, that just,
It
no, it
helps.
didn't skyrocket it at all, because we still had this negative perception of the blended whiskey.
Sure.
I mean, I've told the story about the difference in the blend versus the bourbon. I couldn't begin to tell you how many thousands of times. People still come up to me and said, Four Roses, why are you selling that
stuff again. Now, I'm being nice.
Yeah.
And, but they don't realize it's a bourbon. So, I mean, we're just scratching the surface, and our growth has been absolutely amazing. I'm gonna go ahead, now,
So we're gonna have
we
to
were
taste
beginning
this
to need a new, some more shelf space in liquor stores. We were getting one facing. That's one of the reasons we introduced a small batch. That's one of the reasons of the unique shape of the bottle, wanted to have something eye-catching. But we also want to begin to illustrate the uniqueness of Four Roses in the fact that we do distill and age separately 10 recipes.
Okay.
There's an infinite number of ways, or close to. If it's not infinite, it's pretty close. Number of ways you can mingle or blend 10 straight bourbons.
Lots of
Sounds like it. Well, I mean, you start getting into various ages. Is it going to be 10 years, or are you going to have some all 10 years, or all 8 years, or all 6 years, or 5, or a combination of 5 and 8s and 10 and 7s, or is it going to be? I've never seen one of our bourbons that equal proportion 10% of all 10% 10 recipes, but if
Maybe
you're
that's
gonna have
something on the horizon.
10% of one, 3% of anything's on the horizon.
Yeah.
And because we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
And if it's not infinite, it'd be way past my lifetime before we ever get. But it could take us so long. We decided we use 4 of our recipes
Okay.
for no other reason than we're Four Roses, and just to begin to illustrate then the difference in Four Roses. If you just to smell side by side, just the nose. The 4 recipes we use here, we use 50% of each grain recipe. And then with each grain recipe, we use 30% of a yeast that generates more of a rich, full-bodied fruitiness, 70% of one that generates spiciness. So the yeast we use for single barrel is not 1 or 2 here. So even the common denominator, even though they're different recipes, the common denominator, the yeast here, is not 1 or 2 here. So in a blind, completely different, in a blind tasting, side by side of experts, they could not tell someone that we're it's from the same distillery.
Yeah, you can't tell.
And that's uniqueness.
That's very unique, because you can smell the difference.
Oh, absolutely. Just the nose.
Oh, wow.
It's dramatically different. So that's our regular lineup, and then we have private barrel selections. They've become very popular, whether it be retailers, restaurants, bars, even private groups purchasing barrels through a retailer or someone with a license to purchase and sell bourbon or distilled spirits. We have a private barrel program. Barrel programs that people will come in and are given an opportunity to select. I do most of them, about 70, 75, 80% of them down at our other facility.
The private
The private selections, where I'll take a thief, withdraw samples, put samples in a tasting glass versus these rocks glasses, and let people smell, taste, evaluate, and select a barrel or more. And it will be any one of the 10 recipes. And all we will then do for bottling processing is to run through a sock type filter, only removing the charcoal. And it's at barrel strength, whatever comes out of the barrel, that what goes into the bottle, nothing's removed other than charcoal. It's the closest a consumer can come to tasting bourbon straight from a barrel, like the people selecting the barrels. And we do a lot of those. And of course, our limited edition single barrel in the spring, limited edition small batch.
You get a lot of people who buy barrels at a time for
Yeah.
themselves. A lot of different
Different groups. Yeah, generally.
Yeah.
Or there's more retailers that do that, of course.
So they have a private selection.
Right.
That's awesome. Well, we've had a great day here with Jim. We really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. The tastings. This is fantastic bourbon, something that you all really need to taste, and go out and buy 1 or all 3 of these, because they're all completely different. So thank you very much, Jim, for your time.
Very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Enjoy being with you today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.